Florida.
Oh, Crimea River.
I'm
Just got back from like 6 months in Florida. Yeah.
going back next week for another 2 months.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. All right. The whole Florida has got Canadians in it. It's like people tell me you can't walk a block without bumping into someone from Thornhill when you're walking in Miami. What's that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Next, Simon, we were learning this issue that made us all a little bit. Oh, wait a minute, dongle. We were learning this issue that made us all a little bit uncomfortable.
You're not recording.
Because, yeah, because we Rav Sharaga's psak was, look, you ate the produce, and it is what it is, and you got what it was kosher. It just relied on heter mechira, and so it's too bad. You got to live with it, right? So we were a little bit unhappy with that, especially because the guy should be entitled if he paid a premium for the more expensive produce, and there was misrepresentation, and the person, especially if the person did it b'mezid, perhaps we said we could hear it when it was done b'shogeg, right? But if it was done b'mezid, and that's really what the annotator said, but he said, listen, take a look at the next tshuva. Maybe you'll get some satisfaction. So let's take a look at the next tshuva. Izmin pero shmita lechumra v'kibel heter mechira v'doresh pitzui. Yeah, it's coming up. Give it a second. Give it a second. It's technology, folks. Yeah, yeah. All right. There you go. A guy ordered produce from Shemitah, but he wanted the more machmir shita as far as Shemitah produce, and he got heter mechira produce, and now he wants to get some kind of compensation. Okay, so this is a bit longer tshuva. Uvda asa kaman be'ulam mifa'ar im hashgacha mehuderet. Following issue came before us in a beautiful five-star hotel with a mahadrin hashgacha. Okay, shehizminu mibal ha'ulam chamesh me'ot manot mahadrin. That the customer ordered from the hotel 500 mahadrin meals, or I guess they're making a simcha. The hikbid bala simcha shekol hayirakos yavul nachri she'ein bahem kedusha shvias. And the Baal Simcha wanted to make sure that this was all from property that was owned by a Gentile. I want this produce to come from Jordan or from somewhere else, Egypt, where I don't know where Israel gets its Yavul Nachri, that has no question of Shemitah on it whatsoever. Because I personally don't want to, I want to be machmir, not to rely on heter mechira. The gam chela gadol meha muzmanim machmirim kamokain. And there are many people who are going to be at the simcha who are also machmir in the same way. By the way, it's a chumrah, but it also leads to a kula because you're helping the farmers in Israel get poor. So whether or not that's a consideration of halacha, I think it should be. I think it should be a consideration, but it all depends on a person's outlook in life. If I'm only concerned about my own neshama, so the heck with what happens to the farmers. I'll just make sure that I get my produce from Jordan because I don't want to get involved with any halachnic issues. But there's other considerations when you make these halachic decisions for yourself, right? It's like the guy who, during davening, I have to say every word out loud. But what about the fact that you're bothering all the people that are around you? The heck with all the other people. This, yeah, right. So in other words, okay, that's enough. We're not going to say any more. But no, you're hurting the farmers who are keeping Shemitah. They're producing produce, and they're relying on the heter mechira. Heter mechira. They sell their property. They sell their property on paper to an Arab, And that's the heter that Rav Kook and many other poskim in the early part of the 20th century gave to allow farmers to stay in business. Now, there are other mechanisms. There's something called Otzer Beistin, where a person basically gives the Beistin the rights to work. Basically, the Beistin is now sort of like the proprietor of the field, and they're the ones who are buying and selling the produce. So that's another heter that has become more popular in recent years, that more Haredi communities are more willing to accept. But the point is that this guy wants just Yevul Nachri. He just wants to get the produce from grown outside of Eretz Yisrael. L'tzarach kach gava mimenu bal ha'ulam tosefes shel eser shekel avur kol mana. It almost sounds like the same shaila. I don't know why it's a separate shaila. But the owner said, I'm going to have to charge you an extra 10 shekel per meal. V'hinei la'achar she'orchim achlu v'shasu b'chasuna odia bal ha'ulam lebal hasimcha ki nafla kan ta'us. So after the meal is over, the hotel manager tells the Baal Simcha that unfortunately there was an error. And all of the produce was really heter mechira produce. And you know what? I'll pay you back the difference. In other words, you paid me 100 shekel a meal, and really it should have only been 90 shekel a meal. So I'm going to give you back the difference. I'll give you back 5,000 shekel for the overpay. Ulam bal hasimcha kaas ma'od v'chamaso v'arovo al kol bal ha'ulam al ki bal ha'ulam lo amad b'havtachaso. However, the Baal Simcha got very upset, and his rage burned within him, which is a pasuk from Megillas Esther, because the owner of the hotel did not abide by his word. Uvikesh mimenu pitzui holem al hatzar v'ha'agmas nefesh shenigram lo mevakesh sikum nichbad me'od al hatzar. I want compensation for pain and suffering. Let me just make sure I have the correct translation of the word pitzui. But it's basically, he wants an add-on, he wants an additional compensation. Let's see. Yeah, compensation. Okay. You caused me pain and suffering. And so, umavakish, right, so he wants an additional amount. Nafsham lishol higia ma ha'halach omeres bazeh. And so they wanted to know what the halach has to say about it. Umekablim alehem esadin kedas Torah. And they will accept upon themselves whatever the psak is from the beis din, they will accept. Okay, so it sounds almost like the very same shaila, more elaborate, probably because Reb Sharaga wrote this tshuva more than once. Perhaps there was more than one instance where this took place. So he says, Isa b'mishnah b'bechoros. So there's the Mishnah Bechoros, which we saw before. Ashochet es ha-bechor, u'mochar b'soro v'noda shelo her'ehu l'chacham v'achlu es ha-basar, chayev lahachzir lahem es ha-kesef. If a person shechts a firstborn animal, and he sells the meat of the animal, and then they discover that it was not shown to a chacham, and they ended up eating the meat. Now, in that situation, the meat is a problem, because you're not allowed to. If you have a firstborn animal, it has to be brought as a korban. If you use it instead for regular use for chulin, you're eating something that's Choshen. You're eating something that was reserved for the altar. So therefore, you have to give everyone chayv lahachzir lahem es hakesef. You have to give everyone a refund, because you gave them something that was mamish not kosher. V'chein hashochet es hapara u'macha b'noda shehi treifim ma she'achlu achlu ma she'lo achlu yachzir lo es habasar v'yachzir lahem es hadamim. And if a person shechts a cow and he sells it, and then he discovers that it was a treifa, whatever they ate, and whatever they didn't eat, they should return the meat, and he has to give them a full refund. Okay? Umarin b'shulchan aruch pasak, amocher sapor v'nimseis treifim masha achlu v'hu yachzir lehem es hadamim. That's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, v'chein pasak b'shulchan aruch, and the same thing is in Yoredeya. Okay? Now, v'hizbir hasma she'ein achilas halokchim chashuva hana lahem, ela adar rabat sarhu lahem shavar al-isr doraisa af shahayu shogigim. And the Sma explains is because they didn't receive any benefit, even though they filled their bellies, but they filled their bellies with something that was not kosher midioraisa, and as a result, they are distressed by that fact, and so therefore they derive no benefit. Chen kosav hanasivas da'afilu shayu shogigim tzarich kaparu tshuva lahagin min hayisurin kaven sha'avru al isr deoraisa. And the Nasiva says the same thing. Now, by the way, the Makor Baruch, the annotator says that he's printing this tshuva as an addendum to the previous tshuva. The previous tshuva was typed up. This tshuva was just written out by Rav Sharaga, and he's now elaborating on the previous tshuva. Right. So in general, we don't, most of our cattle does not come from Jewish sources. So when it doesn't come from a Jew, it's not a problem. If it belongs to a Jew, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says you have to wait until it develops a mum. Once it develops a mum, it loses its kodshim status. And then you give it to a Kohen, and then the Kohen can do with it as he pleases. Okay, so and nowadays you don't have to give it to a Kohen because it's only a monetary issue, and Kohanim can't prove that they're Kohanim, so it can be used regularly. So I think what they do is they wait for the animal to develop a mum, but I'm not 100% sure. But that would be the only thing you have to do is let it graze and let it develop some kind of blemish. You're not allowed to inflict the blemish. Because that would be removing kedusha off of an animal. Okay, so anyway, ulafi ta'amam ein chiluk bein imhaya hamocher yodeya shehu treifa o shoge. So according to this reasoning that's brought by the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, there really wouldn't make a difference whether the seller had violated this arrangement deliberately or accidentally. Either way, he has to give a refund. The me'achar ve'ein hana'asam chashuva hana chayv lahachzir lahem es adamin. Since they're eating something that's mamish treif and they're getting no benefit, the seller has to give them a refund. Omnam Rashi bebechoros b'Rabbeinu Gershom kasvu dehachiv midin knas shekansu oso shemochar treif Yisrael. However, Rashi and Rabbeinu Gershom are of a slightly different opinion. They say that the obligation for the seller to give a refund is a penalty to them. It's a penalty that you deliberately sold something non-kosher to another Jew. He says, and the Mukhe Yosef says the same thing. When you have a butcher who deliberately sells treif meat, we penalize him, sha'afal pi, like the guy in Muncie, sha'afal pi sha'achlo es habas or yachzir lehem es adam. Even after they've eaten, you have to give them a full refund. Mashma lahedja dim lo noda hadavar kodam ha'machir below ha'isab shi'al yidei ha'mocher, which implies that if the seller was not aware that the meat was treif when he sold it, and there was no negligence involved, ein lekanso la'achzir hadamim shal habasar sha'achal halokech, then it would not be appropriate to penalize the seller to force him to give back a refund. But he would have to at least consider that he should refund them the higher amount that they're paying for kosher meat if there's a differential. So if, for example, kosher meat is $5 a pound and non-kosher meat is $3 a pound, you would have to give them the differential of $2 a pound from whatever they ate. Whatever is still intact, they should give back to the seller. And he'll give them back a full refund for whatever's intact, and he would refund them the differential for whatever they consume. Shach and the Taz say the same thing. You only make the seller pay back if he did it deliberately, but if he did it unintentionally, you don't penalize him in that way. Well, let's see. First of all, we have to find out, was there negligence on behalf of the hotelier? Okay, v'chein kasav hapri chadash, v'hevi hashulchan gavoa, v'chein kasav varach hashulchan kedas hashach, v'kiven tu mishum knas, lo kansinan lemocher ela keshemocher b'mezid. So he just brings a whole bunch of other poskim who say the same thing. Ulam, amachane Ephraim kasav the lichora daber zer shana b'machlokas ben harambam ve'aravid. However, the Machane Ephraim suggests that this is actually a machlokas between the Rambam and the Ravid. B'din ha'ochel dvar iser bein bezadon bein bishkaga. The ladas ha'Rambam eino mevarich. The question is as follows. What if I realized after having eaten a sandwich that the sandwich was treif? Okay, do I have to bench or not? Do I have to make a bracha acharona on having eaten treif? So that according to the Rambam, you don't make a bracha. You don't make a bracha on something that was not kosher. Well, maybe the bread absorbed the flavor of the treif, okay? Or maybe it's just the borina fashos, okay? The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam. He says, look, granted it was not kosher, but you did benefit. You can go a whole day and the next till tomorrow without another meal. You were satiated. Ubir hamachane Ephraim de harambam sober de kevin shu dvar iser ein lo hana vein achilasan echsheves achila klal. So the Machane Ephraim says that when a person eats something that's not kosher, he is not benefiting, like we suggested before, and therefore his eating is not considered an eating, and therefore it doesn't warrant a bracha. B'haravid sover de sof nene. The Ravid disagrees and he says, look, Lamaisa, at the end of the day, you got hana. Thank Hashem for the hana that you got. Aval kasav shemidivrei haramba behilchos trumos einu nirake. But the Rambam seems to disagree. Now, because of azivchei tzedek, the yadua de bederach klal le'inyan mamun kaimelan hamotze mechavero olav arai. Now, the Sefer Zivchei Tzedek writes that, as we all know, when it comes to monetary issues, whenever there's a gray area of halacha, the person who wishes to extract money has the burden of proof. He has to prove without any doubt that he's owed the money. Otherwise, the Beis Din will not award him the money. And if there's a machlokus in the poskim as to which way to go, the person who's holding the money can always say to the claimant, sorry, buddy, but I go according to that other psak halacha, to that other opinion. And therefore, while you may feel you're justified according to the Ravid, I go like the Rambam. V'anachnu hasfaradim kibalnu aleinu haras moran v'chol makom sheposak moran din echad ein anachnu yecholim lomar kimli neged maran. But now listen to what he says. We Sephardim, we have accepted upon ourselves to always follow the psak of Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch. Even when there are other Rishonim who disagree with the Machaber, with the Shulchan Aruch, we Sephardim always follow the Shulchan Aruch. And by the way, this was an area of a bit of controversy, I should say, among in recent years among Sephardim in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Ovadia was very, very makbid on this idea that we always follow Maran, we always follow the Machaber and Shulchan Aruch. But there were other Sephardic traditions from other countries that had immigrated to Eretz Yisrael, who felt that if there's something that's written, let's say, by the Ben Ish Chai and other latter day Sephardic poskim from Morocco or Syria, from where they came from, sometimes you could mitigate the psak of the Shulchan Aruch with later poskim from Sephardic lands. And this was a big area of controversy within the Sephardi community. You and I aren't as connected to it because that's not, we're not living in that community, but you should know that it's like it was a big thing. And still, I think, remains to be a big thing among many Jews. So anyway, actually, not this Motzei Shabbos, but next Motzei Shabbos, we're showing a film called The Unorthodox, which is a dramatization, which is also very amusing, about the rise of the Shas party in the 1980s. And I fell in love with that film. I think if you've never seen it, it's a great film because it has a lot of historical information about how the Sephardic community moved from being a completely second-class group within Israel, and how they asserted their rights and became one of the most powerful political parties in Eretz Yisrael today. So, and some of it is very funny in the way that it depicts it. But anyway, okay. So we Sephardim have accepted that we always go like the Mechaber, and so therefore a person is claimed against that, he's the defendant, and that he claim is he owes money. He can't say, well, I don't paskin like the Shulchan Aruch, I go like the Rav. Umasha Kosav Maran HaShulchan Aruch b'mocher basar asur dechayv la'achzer hadamim. Anu dafka im hayodea mikodem da bitreifa umochar b'mezid. And so therefore, when the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you're obligated to refund the money, that the seller is obligated to refund the money if it's discovered to be treif, that's only when it was done intentionally, as the Meforshim to the Shulchan Aruch explain. Avali mochar becheskas ksher v'nimseis treifa delo pasha. But if he sold it unintentionally and the buyer has already consumed the product, so then, according to the Mechaber, the seller would not be chayiv to pay. Ella de im hakoine nasan damim ba'achlo, azay mechuyev hamocher lachshov habasar sha'achlo hakona demei treifa bezol biachzer hamoser lakona masha lokach yoser mi demei treifa. But if there's a price differential between the kosher meat and the non-kosher meat, and the buyer has already consumed the non-kosher meat, the seller has to at least return to him the differential in price. And whatever is still intact, then the buyer is entitled to a full money back refund. Gamim hamocher mocher b'shogeg, afilim kfar achlu halokeh chayv hamocher lachzer hadamim, ikol makom yochel hamocher lomar, kimli kisvaras hataz v'hashach v'apri chadash, the b'shogeg ena mechuyev lachzer ladavka mashalokach yoser midemei treifa b'zol. And the Zivchei Tzedek says that even though, according to one set of poskim, if you doesn't make a difference whether you sold it b'mezid or b'shogeg, you always have to give the guy a refund. But a seller could say, I paskin like the Shach and the Taz, who explain the Shulchan Aruch that you only have to return the money if you did it b'mezid. But if you did it b'shogeg, I paskin like them. Aval ima lokech adayin lo shileim, ein hamocher yochol lahotzim halokech klum de yochol lokech lomar kimli keposkim shesobrim shegam b'shogeg chayv hamocher lachzer kol adamim ad kan devar. But let's say the buyer hasn't paid yet, which is usually what happens at a catered meal. You put down a deposit, but then the balance is due once the chassan is over. You all know those stories, we all know that. Anyone who's made a wedding, you sit down with the caterer at the end of the meal and you pay him what you owe him. So what about a situation where the buyer has not yet paid, he's already consumed? The seller says, well, the Shach and the Taz say that because I did it b'shogeg, you still have to pay me. But you just don't have to pay, you're exempt from paying me the higher price for the kosher, but at least pay me for the non-kosher. The guy could say, I'm sorry, I don't paskin like the Shach and the Taz. I don't have to pay you anything. So it all depends whether it's after payment was made or before payment was made. Because either one can use this advantage of saying, I paskin like the other ruling. Basin would say the same thing. It depends who paid the money out. In other words, who is in possession of the cash and who's trying to extract the cash. That whoever's trying to extract has the full burden of proof. If the other party says, I go like the other psak, and therefore I'm exempt, there's nothing you can do legally in Beis Din. Okay, now everything that we've said up until now is within Isser de Oraisa. Okay, so you're talking about its mamish trait. That doesn't really fully address the question of the issue of the Shemitah produce in the hotel, because Shemitah is at best an Isser de Rabbanan. Okay, so he therefore says, Ulam be'Isser de Rabbanan, Pasak Marin dim aperos kayam in Machzer aperos, benotel dam bim achlam masha achal achal ve'namocher Machzer loklam. That the Shulchan Aruch paskins that if the produce is still intact, then you return the produce and you get a full refund. But if the produce was already eaten, since it was only an Isser de Rabbanan, the buyer is not entitled to a refund. And it seems like from the language of the Shulchan Aruch that you don't have to pay him back anything. That implies you don't even have to pay him back if there's a price differential between the kosher and the rabbinic non-kosher. So the question is, why shouldn't the seller at least have to pay back the differential? If after all, it'll turn out that you're rewarding a person who ended up passing off cheaper produce that wasn't kosher midrabanan. So v'hashach kosav the keben she'isr hu midrabanan rabbanan asru sa'ochel ba'achila avalo lechayiv mamon b'mekachtos. So the shach explains that even if you paid more because you thought it was free of that rabbinic prohibition, when the rabbis banned that produce, they only banned its consumption, but they didn't ban the ability to make money off of that produce. So within Imamanus, Yishira Zal Din Torah, and therefore from a financial standpoint, that produce is considered 100% kosher. Behevi Shamraya Medivrei Harav Hamagin. And that's the way the Shach, that's the way the Shach brings. He brings it from another post from the Magin Mishnah as well. Okay, so all of that we're seeing up until now is sort of a review. It's has a little bit more elaboration on it, but I guess we have to see more of where we're going with this. And I guess we'll hold it here and we'll finish this tshuva hopefully tomorrow to really see what in the final analysis is the psak. So we have a little bit more text to do, but we'll hold that off until tomorrow. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. And then I'm off on Friday. I'm here tomorrow, and then I'm off on Friday, and I'll be gone for a week. Okay? All right. Have a great day, everybody.